wanted to say from the outset that all the devs have really had a great time looking at all the Player Studio submissions. It's fun for us to see the creativity coming from the players and from the community. And it's a great opportunity for you guys that you've always wanted something in the game. Now it's your chance to jump in there and make it. And we found that the most successful creators are people that are engaged and playing the game and kind of understand what is kind of missing from the game. What fun things would there be to create for housing or for any of these other categories. And we've also enjoyed seeing how everybody interacts on the forum. So we have the general forum, and then we have the forum set aside for creators that once you have the submission that you can discuss in more detail with other creators and give each other feedback. And it's been really great seeing the community sort of embrace this initiative. At the end, this is really your guys' game as well as ours. And we just love seeing the creative. So when these items get to the valid state, on the art end, we will move them to pending finance approval if we still need the verified information, or if the item's going to be rejected. We always try to give some feedback that can help you maybe improve the item or reapproach the item. Because obviously there's certain items that, for one reason or another, maybe we have too many of them, or maybe the level of quality of the 3D work just isn't quite there yet. We want to encourage you to keep working on it. So I'm trying to give you some constructive feedback, and we encourage you to use the general forums if you haven't had something suggested but accepted yet. And some of these programs take a little bit of time to master, so also be patient. And the more you do it, the better your research will be. And so I think we're going to review some specific items today. So do we have an order? Who's going first? All right, we'll slide the microphone around. We're going to review all these items, and then use some time for Tramell at the end. The newest edition of Player Studio is Planet Side 2, and Tramell, I'm sure, has some a lot of advice on what to see and hold things and so forth.
My name's Dave. Joe introduced me. Covic on the forums, if you're talking on the forums. I'm going to show some of the mistakes, some of the common things we look for and what to do. And the program that we have, this is really cool. I mean, first off, why would you want to make something Player Studio? Everybody wants to have something in game, something you created. It's a great private thing to have something in the game. And then also too, there is the financial point of you get 40% of whatever sales that thing makes, and that thing keeps on going. You can make it a couple weeks ago, and you're still making money a year from now. It's a really great opportunity for artists to get their stuff in game, to make some money, and enjoy making 3D art just like we do. So, let's see. Okay, this is one of the things I want to show. This is one of the submissions we got, and this was the screenshot they sent us. And based off the first screenshot, I'm like, well, that looks really cool. It was for the Dark F contest. I'm like, that's a really great item. And we'll get a lot of stuff like that. From the screenshot, it looks great, but the technical implication is not there. So, let me see. So, when I first opened it up, yeah, here's the geo. We always check it. We open it up, check out the geo, and I couldn't tell at first, but some of the geo, it didn't mirror from side to side. These things are kind of clicked on, and there's actually geo inside of geo. So that's one thing we want to look for. We want nice clean geo for rendering in game. And, oh yeah, when I opened it up, I can see that there's 2 sets of lines, 2 sets of shields in there. It would have been a lot of cleanup on our part. And the things that get in the easiest are things that we don't really have to touch. It's done great, we'll put it right in. And then, here's the UV map they had. There was a lot of empty space. Usually you want to fill up the whole area. All this up here was empty. You know, they got the asymmetrical look, but I didn't really need it because both sides were symmetrical to each other. So what I did, instead of just talking about, you know, what should have been done, is I kind of quickly redid it. So, because we're all artists, we want to see visually how to change things. So, first thing I did is I took their geo, I threw it in ZBrush, and I made a ZBrush model of it. Now the reason I did this too is it's the easiest way to get a normal map. If you're making geo, you want to kind of know what a normal map is, and you're making 3D objects. A normal map is just, here it's on the bottom right here, it's a kind of bluish purple map that tells the game what recedes and what extends out from the geometry. It's cheaper on the computer than actually making geo. Now here's the shield I did. I'll open both of them here so you can see the difference. This was the color map that was sent to me. Sorry, I misorganized this. Okay. Oh, man. Let me see the difference. Okay. Here's a color map I did. One thing we see a lot of people doing is they're painting in their highlights and they paint in their shadows really dark. Now you can see I have a little bit of ambient occlusion here. I got the UV overlay, but I didn't paint in really bright highlights into the gems there. Because what happens in game is, like see these dark areas, it doesn't matter, it's always look like that in game. There could be a light shining on that, and it's not going to give you that 3D effect. And then what also happens too is people are, happen a lot of times they take this map and they make their normal map out of it, and it causes this to either be a dent or a protrusion like a bolt. So I made a color map, my spec map, changed the geo a little bit, and let's see, here's the normal map that came to me, through a filter. It's a little bit flatter. It's not really going to show a lot in 3D. So you can see the difference to the normal map I got on the bottom there and that one. And then what I did is I brought them into game. I should have a video here. Here we go. So what I did, this is both of them together rendered in game. The new one I did is on the left and the old one's on the right. You can see, here I'll bring it back a little bit. Pause it. See that I'm still getting the highlights and stuff because the game's going to show that area from whatever light source you got. You don't have to always paint those things in here like here. And these are some of the common mistakes we see. And you can see how the light is reflecting off these shapes a lot more than if you just run the normal map through a color map through a filter. And then also what I did is I kept my geo count exactly the same as theirs, but I pushed it out instead of keeping it flat. So both these shields are almost the exact same amount of polygons. But this one here has relief to accentuate those gems, and the dragons are on the sides. Let me see. And there's just a normal map showing. And you see how this is all catching light. And you can see how here you got these dents or the protrusions because it was just a color map filter. It doesn't actually push what I think the artist was trying to do with those things. Another thing too, I noticed, we get lots of missions where they kind of show stuff. Let's see. Like this was a map. Up here was the back of their shield. There was nothing there. When you're making stuff, it's 3D. You want to have stuff around the whole thing. Every part of it is going to be looked at sooner or later. So don't leave any space just blank. And if you take your time, you can make some really good stuff, and it'll sell well. So that was just some of the common mistakes I see. Using a color map to get the normal map filter, painting in the highlights too bright, or leaving in that stuff coming out the normal map, or if you're making a height map that's being converted to normal map, it should be created separate from your color map. Your color map is a start, but you need to change a lot of things.
I would just add that I think that's one of the more common mistakes is is if something doesn't need to be asymmetrical, you can have that.
Yeah, and that's something.
Sometimes you can even order it too, depending on if it's like a round thing that's exactly the same.
That's something I wanted to show right here
There's a lot
too.
more real estate in pixel space for it.
Yeah, I was able. I created this shell. I just did it really quick, but I'm using only a 512 by 256, so I'm using half the map that the other shield was using because I was able to mirror on both sides. There was no reason to have it pelted out like that. So that saves space and file memory. I'm going to hand it over to Tim now, show some of the in-house items.
All right, these will be mostly house item focus. Again, I'm Tim, director on Everest 2, Haohmaru. Some of you may love me, most of you don't. All right, I want to go in the order of kind of what was originally submitted against some of the feedback we gave and what came back. None of this is drastic, except for one of the examples, but it touches on something I tend to see most, which is texture quality. Touching on kind of what Dave said, sometimes the entire map isn't used well, or it's just kind of set up, resulting in kind of a lack of detail. You can do a lot with a 512, as I'll show. You just kind of have to plan better and then not try and bluntly take the easy way out. So first up is a piano. And in this piano, it looks pretty nice, but you see there's some large swatches of blank space, and the original piano was submitted with a bench as a separate object, but sharing the map. So the first suggestion I had was get the bench out of there, because people may want to place the bench separately. In fact, it wasn't in this file. And secondly was, you framed this area, what could go there that would kind of push it +1. And then add a couple curves and just kind of try and work on some of the boxiness. It wasn't much, just some light feedback that said, try a little more. And from that, the artist produced this. And this turned out really nice. Just took some of the feedback and did absolutely what was suggested. So turned the bench space into exactly what it needed to kind of get rid of that big empty area. Trimmed out some of the border edges, had a little bit of curve. It's not drastically different, but it is better. The second one's a great example of, and this was a very early item. This is just a wooden tub, as you can see, but it had some fundamental issues. Again, a lot of blank space. There's some UV issues. They were thinking about how they could possibly use some space and mirror it on the inside, but it was stretched. The area that has the most space got some of the least space on the map. And it was a little bit boring. Our feedback was, aside from the technical cleanup, consider doing something with this rim. Maybe add a little bit of silhouette, just something to make it nicer. And from that, the person completely rebuilt it and built this. And a lot of people have purchased this. And why? Because it filled a void we didn't. There's a complementary set to this, a vanity, a wash basin, some other things. And it's not super crazy, but it has the right amount of detail that we're expecting. Just a little bit of that shadowing to kind of pull out the panels, soften that edge. It kind of connects this floor into the edge right there. A nice beaded trim, just to, instead of leaving this flat back, they added some rivets and some filigree. The claws got to stay. The polycam was great. It was just really nice. And again, the complementary set was made from that. Now, here's kind of what I mean more about the some of the loops we go through in getting an item initially to ultimately accept. There were 6 revisions. I cut this down to 3 for the presentation. And this was the very first texture that was mapped to this object. All right. So the person was really good about reworking against feedback, but it stresses a 512 can go a long way. You've got a lot of surface area. Put detail there. We're not asking for super crazy stuff, but something that makes the object feel of the period, created by craftsmen of the time. This kind of wasn't too gnomish, and one of the cardinal sins against our guidance, if you can barely see here, there is text, which is spelled out quite clearly, don't do. So aside from the text that's in the normal, you have over 90% of your map, this silver gray, no subtle highlights, no rivets, no anything. So he went back to the drawing board, completely rebuilt it, and then came up with this. Now, what's wrong here more is style and some texture work. You can see this area right here is this handle. So proportionally, it's like a quarter of what the panels are. That's kind of one of the immediate red flags, is not understanding the distribution of your texture space. This is going to be visually small. Let it take up small space. There's only so much you can see on the screen at once. And conversely, this was really poly heavy, so we had to just knock it back from that. But again, this chrome is too brushed. It's much too modern for something to be in our game. And then some of the rivets that were overlaid, there was no trying to balance the values in here to try and get them to seat in there. And again, the lighting is baked in, which is just going to fight the normal. And then the sixth revision goes to this. So he went back again, put in some trim strips, it's a much smaller area for that blue crystal on top compared to what it was in the third revision. Did some panels that tried to accent the edges that were already in the geometry. The hinges are a much smaller space, and just some more gnomish flair, gears, which is a great way to say gnomish in our game, and then trimming out the surfaces. So he put in 6 revisions of this, and something we decided to do was actually animate the gears and glow the crystal and actually attach a little bit of sound to it. In the end, it was a good item, but it took 6 revisions to get there. He was pretty patient with me, I'll say. But you can see, this is, hasty, honestly, and this is now starting to think about how this is going to be applied to this. You really should think about your items, what it's going to look like in the end to get to this, because you won't know how to lay out your components otherwise. And just to give a couple examples of some things we say in our feedback a lot, this is again a 512. I'm sure if you play Q2, you know that this is the travel belt. But what we did immediately is we knew the size we wanted to create was about a human tall, and we wanted it to look pretty ornate. So the first thing we did is realize we're going to mirror it. So once we know we're going to mirror it, and we model it up and start to belt it, the biggest shapes get the most space. And what we start doing is putting those shapes down first, unwrapping them, and then start working in all the smaller shapes into the void areas around. And the other thing we start to do in here is you can see that there's a contrast difference right here, but on the underside, it gives a little bit of a sense of shadowing. Just helps seam some of those areas together and feels much more finished overall. But this isn't crazy, again, by any means. It's just accenting the edges so the form pops out. Some filigree just to, again, get rid of some of that wood, because if you take that out, it's a big style of wood. Why not fill it with something kind of nice? And then use the space needed, particularly for something like this, to show the glow. And then something even crazier is a gnomish slate. Now again, this is a 512. So if you think to the icebox to this, that's how much you can get out if your planning is good. I've accented the red area to show you one of the things that I think people should really be doing is using trims. If you understand how to model and you have a lot of surface area, trims go a long way in filling that with something interesting. It gives it a finished edge. So all this area is just in this trim. These are actually 2 colors, a silver and a gold, used in different ways to accent different geometry shapes. And then even this little purple area right here was painted once and replicated all around. Again, thinking how's that shape going to be textured. The bag is split down the center. You can see the red line showing the half, and then that area gets the most space. So in the end, everything has the approximate, really close kind of a textile density, so nothing looks blown out or high res compared to its neighbor. And even like presents get one side. A common mistake we see is if a box has 6 sides, we'll see 6 sides of the same present on the sheet. Obviously you only need one. And the blade has the same top and bottom. But overall, and to touch again, some of the intersections of the different materials just get a little bit of shadowing to kind of just help seam them in there. It doesn't take much, but that goes a long way to kind of make it feel finished.
First of all, we say thanks to our volunteers who let us review their submissions. And the other thing too that everybody needs to know is we want you to succeed here. So we'll do our very best to help you in that regard. So I got 3 samples for you. 2 of these are really, really early ones, but they typify a lot of the early mistakes that come through. On this one specifically, this is, Ward House. You can see the basic shape there. It's kind of blocked out, but it really doesn't have any character to it. And it's difficult maybe when you start to think of those things that will drive character for it and will create an interesting profile. Maybe just asking simple questions like, how is it constructed, how it's been used. Those kinds of things will to help inspire you to think about other ways of dealing with the spatial relationships and creating a more interesting profile to it. The other thing too on this one is the texture layout. As you can see there, the UVs, most of the card there is being taken up by essentially one wood pattern, and it's pretty much the same throughout the entire section of that. Most of that could have been accomplished just by mirroring UVs or cutting the model up a little bit so that you could mirror those UVs, and it might take up a fifth of that space there. And that would free up a lot of other space for doing things like maybe there are some form of metal infrastructure that holds it up, or different types of wood items or trim or things that might make it a little more ornate and interesting. They were getting on the right idea there in the lower right-hand corner, but there's just not enough of that going on there. So there's plenty of space here left, plenty of face count left to do a lot of interesting things with it. Now, as a really, really, really simple example, if we go to the next slide, there's a really, really simple shape that's very similar, but you can see it's got a little more character in the sense that, the roof bows and the spatial relationships on the front are a little bit more interesting, broken up by, additional structural elements. Just those kinds of things. You can see the slight differences in the profiles as you switch back and forth that give it that character. Even though it's still very, very simple, it adds to the spirit of it. So next one. Housing items have been really popular, and I think there's a real opportunity there for good ones. It seems like in general, all of the submissions that we've received, the more successful ones are those that have been executed with more sophistication, and they just look cool. They're stuff you want. This is a good example. Stairs have been popular in the past, but a lot could be done here. First of all, it's kind of like the workhouse in the sense that it's basically just been blocked out and just not quite gone far enough with. Additional things could be added to it. How's it used? How is it made? How are those steps attached to that center pole? What additional materials were required in that? And if you look at the UV card layout there, you'll see the same kind of thing where it's essentially the same texture that occupies the entire UV space there, which is totally not necessary. Those areas could be accomplished by mirroring UVs in a tenth of the size of that card. You have plenty of room. Maybe there's carpet that runs through the middle. Maybe if it's old, it's been worn down in the center. I've got another example here coming up where you can see adding simple things like railings or trim on the fascia of it. Those things add to the spirit of it. Go to the next slide. Yeah. So here we've got really simple stairs, but you can see that not only is there a railing, but there's additional details with the posts, and then if you look on the facings of all the steps, there's a little bit of trim in there. It's hard to see on the big screen, I guess. But all of those things kind of add to the spirit of it, and especially with housing items of this nature that can be used for building additional segments and the like. Think modular. You may want to be able to butt these things up together so that they repeat. And that will also create an option to sell multiple versions of the same unit. So then as a really good example, if we go to the next slide, shields have been really, really popular. We've got a lot of them. And we're kind of always harping about making them more than just a basic shape with an image on one side and nothing on the back. So this really typifies how is the thing constructed? It's very, very obvious here the way that this thing is made. It creates a lot of interest in the item itself. You'll see other additional items of interest are, especially in EQ, the color map really drives most of what you see in game. The spec and normal map will kind of help augment that, but they really don't drive it. It's really on the color map. So there's some, very subtle shadows and highlights on this thing that give it a great deal of spirit, that when you see it in game, the normal map will help that, but it's really being driven by the color map. You see the UV layout is done real nice, and most of the card is being used. The other thing to notice too is on the leather wrapping of it, There's a really nice character in the sense that the stretch lines are really kind of give it an energy to it. So all of those things kind of combine to make a really, really nice, constructed piece. It's not just a simple shape with an image on one side, nothing on the back, even though it's very low poly. That's pretty much all I got too. One thing too that we're starting to see is as people are getting better here in the UV layouts, don't forget to weld your UVs. Try and avoid the seams whenever possible. That's it. Thanks.
And, the kind of final thing I'd like to add here is that don't be afraid to solicit the feedback on the forums from your co-creators. On the dev side, we try to provide as much feedback as we can, but we'd love to see what's been happening in the community is having everybody work together to make the right better. And so, when will we do Planet Side 2? Is it the first of... No, when we started this week, Monday.
We turned it on a soft launch last Thursday, and we actually really launched it on Monday of this week. So it's been roughly 5 days.
Do we know how many items are coming in? Hundreds? I'm going to turn it over to our senior art director, Reynolds, to talk about Planet Side 2, our latest studio.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I like to keep it light, man. Y'all are a little bit too serious up in here, so I know, man. Come on. I had to liven this up. I almost fell asleep up there. It's too soothing up in here.
Sexy voice.
I know his voice is just like butter. But anyway, I'm Tramell Isaac, Senior Art Director of Planet Side 2. As you just said, we just started Player Studio. These guys have been, showing me the ropes. They've been doing it for a long time. So I've got 5 whole days under my belt on the Planet Side Player Studio. Yeah, congratulations. And I don't really count most of those days because I was here. So, but the very first day, we got a lot of submissions. I mean, a ton of submissions. I mean, and surprisingly enough, a large number of those were actually pretty good, which was really shocking to me because I thought I was going to get a bunch of crap. And sadly enough, I can't approve them all at the same time, and I'm still going through all of them personally myself. But later on, as we start to refine the process, we're going to start adding more people to the bunch and then actually be able to start approving things at a more consistent pace. One of the things that's different for us versus EverQuest. I mean, how many people are interested in EverQuest stuff? Doing EverQuest stuff? Okay. Yep. So, come on, calm down, everybody. All right. So that's good. That's great. So you guys, I mean, I believe most of the things that you create for EverQuest is like 3D and geometry, right? And all have to know how to unwrap and all that other stuff, right? So that's cool. I mean, we've only got a couple things that we actually have to do for that on Planet Side 2. We've got 5 offerings right now. I'm going to expand that over time, starting with decals, which are basically just images with alpha. I mean, everybody knows how to make an image with alpha, right? So that should be pretty straightforward. Then we've got camo patterns, which are basically just tiling patterns that look pretty cool on a character or vehicle or anything like that. And those are just basically 1024 images that tile in all 4 directions. Then we've got a little bit more complicated, which maybe not for you guys, which is pretty straightforward, but hood ornaments, which can be anything really. This hood ornament this guy turned in that I approved last week is a tornado. There you go, done deal. Tornado, 40%. There it is, easy. We chromed it out. Obviously, it's a hood ornament, so you gotta look stylish. And that was the very first hood ornament we got, so I put it in there. Not a big deal. But very straightforward. All it is geo. The shader itself comes from us. We put that in. There's a number of things right now with our process. I believe that it's more about like 75% of the work is on your end, and about the rest of it is on us. Right now, we're trying to refine that process to make it a little bit more on the player side than it is on us. But we're just starting out. We're just learning a lot, so we're going to find out how it goes. Then, of course, we got cockpit decals, which are just basically images with alpha again, but you have to texture them based on the UV layouts of every cockpit that we have, which is basically 5 different cockpits for each one of the flying vehicles. And then finally, we've got helmets, which are fairly complicated, and they're complicated because you don't have to create the texture. That sounds simple, right? No, it's not. You have to use our textures. And that is because PlanSci 2 at the moment is right at the edge of exploding for as texture memory goes. So we have to make sure that we maintain everything texture memory wise. We make our helmets the exact same way. So if anybody says it's impossible to do, trust me, it's not. So here's some examples of some things that people have already created. And this is just with, a couple days. And I saw this when it first started. It was mediocre, and right now it's just starting to look pretty good. And that was after basically 2 days of people going back and forth. Not only just me, but the guys in the forums as well, going back and forth, giving feedback, and talking about what is and what is not Terran Republic and things like that. So I'm assuming by the time I get back home, this thing will be finished and ready to go. So it's looking pretty good so far. And here's another one that a guy has already started, and this is his ZBrush model. He's using the same production pipeline that we use. We actually build all of our models, most of the significant models in ZBrush first to get the outer cage, the high-res cage, and then we build a lower poly version over the top of that, and then we texture it with our textures. So that one's coming along, so I expect that one to be pretty far along once I check on the forums when I get back. So some of the examples of some of the camo patterns that were submitted, looks pretty straightforward. It's tile and texture is blobby, okay. Then we got another one that's just colored a different way. That's blobby. Real hard stuff, huh? There you go, the money, easy money. Here's the one that's kind of like stormy, kind of tiling pattern. Here's another one, pretty interesting, hexagons. This one is pretty cool because actually the darker blue ones have a matte finish, and then the gray ones actually have a more specular highlight. So as the sun goes over the top of them, you see just the lighter ones actually light up. And it's another one that was pretty cool. And one of the fun things about that is that they can create, the players can create basically a grayscale version of that camo pattern, and we can tint it whatever color we want. So in this example, wherever there is red, that could be any color that we want to make it, because he created that tiling pattern basically as a grayscale. So everywhere there's gray, we can make that pink if we wanted to. We can make it yellow, we can make this blue, we can switch it all up. So it's very versatile. We've got some limitations on the things that we can do, but I think what we're offering right now is good for beginners, and we've got some things for some more advanced people. So if you want to, try your hand at making some tiling patterns, I know you guys are EQ through and through, but it's really simple stuff. So everybody likes money, right? So let's get that money. And that's pretty much all I have to say about PlanSci 2. We just started doing this. I hope you guys like to participate. The forums I've seen other people, a couple people from the EQ community actually start making stuff for PlanSci 2, which is great. So I invite all of you guys to go out and try to do some stuff for us as well.
Yeah, we'd like to see the crossover from I'll just mention there. If you make something for EQ2, you can downres a little bit for EQ1. There's probably some pretty cool items that you could make that would be pretty nice. PlanSci 2 is some think, cross-game creation.
How many of you, how many of you are interested in trying your hand at making some things for PlanetSide 2? Nice. How many of you are interested in trying your hand at making some items for Landmark? That was a trick question. It's true though. It's true. And then I was going to ask you if that hood ornament, if there were actually sharks in the tornado. There's an opportunity there. Oh, sweet, sweet. Okay. So here's what we're going to do now. We're going to have Q&A. We got about 15 minutes. I'm going to ask you to say your question, and I'm going to repeat it in the microphone for the recording, and so the NSA can hear you clearly. And then you guys, I'm going to ask you to pass the microphone back and forth so you, and hold it up to your face. Be able to hear you. Who has a question? Sir.
So I was curious about, I saw a lot of talk about the normal and how the normal was generated. A lot of that comes out of the render engine. So I was curious if there's a possibility that maybe we could get a metal viewer, so you can really drop your OBJ file with this texture that's normal and specular, just to see what it looks like, so you can see if your mount is on or off.
Okay. The question he had, and let's see if I can do this, is that the normal, we're talking a lot about the normal maps, and some of what we're seeing that are the highlights and the attractiveness is coming out of the rendering in the rendering package. If we could get a rendering engine that acted like the game's engine, then we could view our item in that environment and have a better idea of how our object will actually turn out in the game. Okay, and then that's a good question. Do you want to go for it, Joe?
Yeah, I can speak to that. This is something we talked about since the inception of Player Studio, and that is one of our goals, to be able to deliver some more useful tools to you guys to aid you in the creation. So that's something we have been talking about and working on how to deliver. Right now, while we're still in the launching the games phase of this, and now we've added PlanetSide 2, I think we're going to end up exploring what we can do there. But definitely that would be a big help if we recognize that. And as we mature this program, that's something we want to be able to do.
And we've built that in, as you can guess, to Landmark. So you're going to be working in the game engine itself. You won't need a separate viewer for it. So in that case, that has a big advantage over the first four. Good point. Next question, Madam.
Hi, I'm with the Home Show channel, representing
The Home Show
decorators
channel,
in
absolutely.
EQ2. And we've been working with one of your Player Studio designers, Jerry Deshan, and he's constantly getting things that we're approving, for him to design, to submit to you folks. And he's constantly getting rejected for being too modern, not scuffed up enough, when at the same time you have the sumac items in the game. So, you talked about filling a void earlier, and, we would like to see for you to start allowing some of those designs that we're approving.
I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to that. So first I'll nip one thing, because it's been a thorn in our side too, which is that damn sumac set. A little history on it. It was made in 2002, before any of our time. It was also never actually placed in game. Someone found it in our files and hooked it up as a reward, and now it lives on forever. So this is one of the things we also want to ensure with Player Studios. Anything that goes in is there forever. And so as we've kind of upped our bar, we are expecting items that we put in to kind of get close to it. We're not as rigid, obviously, but we don't want to see what looks like sumac in there. Something like the sumac could be polished up and get in there. Again, if you look at the wooden tub, if you removed just the shadowing that accented the planes and things, it looks like a sumac. But that little extra detail goes a long way to make it just look refined and better. We also don't we're not asking for things to be weathered. We are saying aged, and it's kind of a term that I guess can be taken a bunch of ways, but we want it to look like the craftsman of the time made it. We don't want birch veneer kind of finishes or something that just kind of feels, again, too modern. I understand you guys want the items, but we still want to make sure that it harmonizes with the world. It's tough. Every time we read it, I read that, what is it, up to 36 or 76 pages now? I'm in there all the time. I definitely sympathize, but at the same time, Rawl has the most items in game. Yes, he
He's
does.
providing the most feedback to the end customers.
I have also personally given him an insane amount of feedback. That icebox was obviously his, and as a kudos to him, we went kind of a little bit beyond and added some extra effects to it, because he was a trooper. I mean, he was kicking and screaming a little, but that's how you get better. And if the easy answer sometimes, honestly, would be for us just to convert them and get in a game. I've spent time writing one single feedback post that would take longer than just going, I'm going to put it in. But the argument is worth having. That's how the items will get better. They'll fill those voids that we haven't filled ourselves, and people will make money. And then just on the quantity amount, you really should treat this, and the best example I can give is something like the App Store. You're in day one, you made money because there wasn't a lot of choice. Now, good luck finding something that's good. We don't want that. We want that cream on the top to come up, and we want the better items to have that lastability. If we just put everything in, you're still fighting for the same dollar that someone's willing to spend. More items does not mean people are going to spend more money. We have proof of that. But a good item generally sells.
Questions? Sir?
For the Haohmaru website too, is there any way to do like animations on it, like the tornado that it spit?
Yeah, the question is, can we add animations to the hood ornaments in Planet Side 2?
Yeah, so in your submission, there's a section for notes, I believe, and you can indicate whether or not you want it to glow or do
So we
something
can have sharks
fancy.
swimming around the tornado.
Yeah, except for the sharks. No, but you can ask for a particular effect, and we can add that to it. I mean, obviously, that increases the time in which it goes from your hands and getting into the store. But as long as it's not out of completely out of this realm, and it's something that you've already seen in the game already, like just some spinning effect on the tornado, or making it glow, or make a sound or something like that. That's pretty straightforward. So just make an indication on the notes and on your submission, and then we'll try to get that in.
There's a submission form that you fill out and include in your submission each time. The last question says, do you have any feedback for the dev team? Don't overlook this. And that's not meant for you to say, I love you guys, or something like that. No. You can do that too. But what they're looking for is they're looking for you to tell us, okay, treat this like a one-hand pointed, or treat this like a one-hand edged weapon. Or, sometimes you're looking at this going, I'm not sure which direction they expect us to swing it. Or it might be, you might say something to them about the scale of it. I intended for this to be the height of a human. Or say something like that if it's not obvious. If you wanted a special treatment or of some sort, please make the top part glow. Or just put it in, say what you can. They can't promise they'll do it, but they would love to hear your vision and see what they can do. Sir?
For Planet Side 2 specifically, how important is it that decals and stuff fit into the lore and the world of the game?
For Planet Side 2 specifically, how important is it that the decals fit into the lore of the world?
It's not important at all. They're just decals. Decals are used to kind of identify the way people feel at whatever particular time. So the more, the merrier. So we got, happy guy skipping down the road decal. Fine, throw it in there. Happy face, fine, throw it in there. As long as it's original art, we'll put it in there. Don't steal anybody's stuff, please. I will find out. And when I do, I will come get you. In person.
And don't pick anything that would offend the customer service department.
Yeah, I mean, if you put offensive stuff, you can submit it. It's not going in, so you're just wasting your own time. So, but anything. Basically, decals are pretty much open season. You can do whatever because people, people feel like they feel whatever. I want to run around with a heart decal. It's awesome. Rainbow decal. We got those in the game already. Lucky Charms stuff. All kind of random stuff. Dragon heads. We got all kind of stuff in there. So bear heads with raw scratches on it. It's like crazy stuff. So decals can be whatever you want it to be. As long as it's cool, people will buy it and want to put it on the Galaxy.
Yes, sir.
So if I try and submit something and it's in valid status, which, okay, but I still can't, I understand not being able to provide feedback because I haven't had something that we want with the point. But I like to be able to at least give a let other people work on it. That's really awesome.
You're bullhorn, aren't you?
I am bored.
All right, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Yes, when we set that up initially, our thinking was people who've been through the whole process and made it all the way to complete will have more empathy for someone else. What's actually ended up happening is there's plenty of empathy to go around in the group. No one's picking on each other. We could probably go in and make a couple clicks and make that happen. I'll go work on that on Monday.
All right, I was wondering if you guys had learned if you authorize these mounts.
Mounts. Okay, the gentleman's asking about mounts. I see your hand volunteering. Okay, Dave, go for it, Dave.
For mounts would be pretty cool. I mean, mounts are always great sellers. We just have technical things we'd have to get past to get mounts. Because you would have to make a model, skin the model. You'd have to use a package you'd have to use Maya. So right there, you'd have to buy Maya. You wouldn't be able to use another program because we'd have to have a skinned model on a skeleton. Because we wouldn't want to take the time to skin it and set it all up too. It'd have to be complete by the time we got it. So we've talked about things like that. We're actually working out some of our technical issues with that to see if we can take Maya through our submission process. But once again, that's going to make the Player Studio artists have to use our specific program. But we are looking at maybe adding mounts as a category. We want to do it. We're not sure if we're going to be able to do it, but it is on the radar.
Can you release the rig and then just do animation retargeting?
He said could release the rig and just do animation targeting. Well, yeah, that's what we would do. We would give you the rig. Like I say, we're like, okay, well, here's the worst skeleton. And you would model to that. And then we would get that and the skins would be set. We would also have to have a way to, I'm looking at maybe like if you had, I could open up the file and then the slight animation so I can see that all the skinning was done. Because that's one of our biggest time consuming processes, is seeing the ones that are good and ones that are not. So if I get a bunch of mounts that are coming in and I'm opening up the files, checking like, okay, the skins aren't right, okay, let's do another one, and that becomes exponentially a lot of time. So we want a way that, as soon as we get it, we can say, okay, this is rigged, he's animating, maybe we have it, there's a video I can click real quick and it shows all the skins are working. I'm like, okay, I'll fully check it out, I'll hook it all up and see if it works in the game.
I want to ask you guys a question here. As part of our preparation for next SOE Live 2014, obviously the composition of the Player Studio community is going to be a little different because Landmark will be out and people will be able to build things with an additional set of tools, etc., inside the game. We're trying to figure out what we should do next year for this panel. What would be helpful? Was this helpful for you guys today? How many of you felt like this was helpful? Okay. What else could we do to help you guys next time? Hand sanitizer? All right, hand sanitizer. Okay. I thought there should be cases of beer in the back. Beginners and experts as a...
Or separate.
Something was going. last year, and it was tough. It was tough to do.
Aaron back there, Aaron has something to say. Aaron helped run that last year.
Yeah, man the computers, most of the majority of the days, each day during Fanfare or SOE Live last year, and very little people ever showed up.
Yeah, I remember you went to Long Beach, so we just kind of standing there.
Did that last year.
Yeah. We took one row of the tournament setup of computers, and we installed software packages on it, which, by the way, is a pain to license for 3 days for a show, and we're not allowed to do anything that's actually saved as a file, and there's all kinds of legal rigmarole for that. It's a pain. But yeah, okay, we'll take that into consideration. Sir?
I would just separate it. Have one for Landmark and one for everything else. They're going to be different.
Okay.
I mean, it seems like the simplest thing, folks who are working in, because Landmark is so much more targeted to in-game. I mean, you're working in engine, which is such a different aspect.
It is very different. Thank you. Sir?
Follow-up question, Matt. So for those of us who have invested 10 plus years in modeling tools, will there be any kind of a way, so if I did something in one box or Blender or ZBrush or something like that, where I can take that model and then put it through a converter and convert it into EQ and stuff?
We will still be accepting things in 3D format. If we have an ability to convert it so that it's made up of voxels and everything like everything else, I don't know. We haven't gotten to that level of detail in any of our meetings. Joe?
In the panel earlier, that question came up on EQN, like the addition of objects and things like that, because Landmark, you're going to be building with the actual building structures, but you're not going to be able to make like barrels and little extra things. So that was sort of an open question that they said they weren't going to give any details on that, but obviously that's something they have in mind. And then I just want to talk a little bit about Player Studio is also going to be heavily involved with EverQuest Next when it comes out, because just like you can in EQ2 and PlanetSide, we're building EverQuest Next from the ground up as far as how the armor sets are constructed and objects for the game. You'll be able to make those type of objects for the store as well. And that's a ways ahead, but and by that point, maybe some of those other file types will be more easily vetted. And the reason we're using OBJ right now is from the technical department and security is it's harder on that file to embed executables or things that could compromise SOE security. And we're working right now to allow other types of files like FBX and right.
Thank you. Additional ideas that we could do next year? Ma'am?
You might want to consider, depending on how big of a player base you get for Landmark, maybe separating out furniture, housing items versus player-borne items into two separate panels or whatnot.
Okay.
Because I think you'll probably have a large base of both, but maybe they don't want to sit through the whole thing for both.
Understood. Thank you. Sir? Forward.
You could make a phony of your best Player Studio seller, one item, or there be something cheap, something small, and just throw it within. So, I think Player Studio, best seller, Jerry,
Okay.
everybody will get one.
All right. That's a good idea. Sir?
When you do people involved that haven't done this before, you can have like a little booth set up where they can bring their laptops and you can tell, okay, pick one of these softwares to install, and this is the next step, and this is the next step. Now open it up and extra tape or something. Just to start from a blank laptop, just Windows or whatever, to get busy.
Good idea. Like a...
You can start with either Blender or Snowprise. So Snowprise is supposed to be in the box.
I got it.
So I need a booth like that, sit there for an hour.
That brings me to another thing too I wanted to say. One of the easiest things to make for EQ2, it's also the same thing that they have in my Planet side. We have cloaks, which is just a pattern that you can use with any paint program. And honestly, I'll tell you, cloaks sell better than anything because they go towards every type of race and player. Like if you make a sword or something, there's only certain people that buy that. And so all our top sellers right now are pretty much cloaks. Some of the house items are doing really well, but the cloaks are the easiest to make and they sell well because anybody wants to put them on and use them.
Well, let me touch on that too. And as we showed earlier, the leatherback set, it was really well built. It's really nice, but it has kind of a limited appeal to who may want to equip it. So it's not always a case of how well is the item created. It's do people want it? Like I've kind of mentioned, the idea is kind of the hardest part. A lot of people tend to create what they want, which is good. But if your goal is to make money, you've got to think what's going to sell, what's diverse, what it's going to appeal to. And something like that tub, fantastic. And we have a couple more items up that initially I didn't really want to put in because we've never done it ourselves, but I'm really curious to see. And one of them is a toilet. And I've seen so many of players.
So T.Ray,
Yes. So I believe the first piece of feedback I gave was remove what's in the toilet. But players create toilets with their own items. In fact, a majority of the homes I go to, I've seen. So I relented on kind of my prejudice against them and said, let's test those waters. I cleaned it up. And,
those blue waters. Those blue waters.
Hey, T.Ray, I think you can expect the toilet foot ornament now.
And we'll see what happens when it comes out. I mean, I'm curious to know, quite honestly.
We're over our time, but we'll take 2 more questions. Any questions here in the back?
For Planet Side 2, in addition to hood ornaments and camouflage, can we expect some other things? Weapon mods, even weapons or vehicles? Or should we keep it down to camouflages and hood ornaments?
Keep it down there, bro. No, what it boils down to is, like I said, we're just starting out with these 5 offerings. We talked about doing weapons in the future. What's probably going to come up prior to that, before weapons, is vehicle cosmetics, which are pretty straightforward, and character cosmetics. They're also fairly straightforward. And then moving on to, if we're going to do weapons, then they're just going to be cosmetic variants of the ones that already exist. Because we start making weapons that need design data attached to them, then this becomes a balancing issue. It becomes, do we need this type of weapon in the game or not? We would much rather keep it really simple. So if you make Beamer version number 2, then we could say, hey, we've got another Beamer up there. If you want to buy it, it's the exact same Beamer as it was before, but now it looks different. So we're probably going to do that, and after we get through work all the kinks out of this and get all the documentations all squared away, then we'll start moving forward with some more complex stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Last question. Ma'am.
I'm not a Player Studio artist. I tried it. I suck. You guys are great. I am really big into decorating with EverQuest 2, though, and just as a voice for a lot of the decorators there, our primary concern, and you commented earlier about the weathered status of items, making things look worn and used. We see a lot of it already on the Station Cash Marketplace, the SOE items, which are very polished, our Cherry Grove, we've got casino games, for Pete's sake. Yet the artists are putting in some really awesome things, getting feedback saying, make it more weathered, make it more worn, make it more environmental appropriate. But it's almost like a double standard. So we're hoping that there might be a little bit more leniency to allow more of what the community wants.
The first texture example I gave for the icebox is kind of what people are doing. Quite bluntly, people are taking, and a good example is, if you go to like Home Depot's website and you find you want to buy this desk in this material, and there's a little birch kind of like sample and then putting it on an item, it doesn't have any flavor, and the normal's going to come out really flat against it, and it looks very modern as a result. All we're asking for is kind of highlight some of those ridges. Again, like the wooden tub is a great example. It's not worn, it's not weathered, it's not aged, it's none of that. It's actually really clean, but it has character in it. It's not a material across the entire surface that doesn't seem like it was contoured the surface. Honestly, a lot of times all it will take is if this was completely a wood top desk and there was an edge right here that was maybe trimmed out, or even if it was wood, just kind of chafe that edge, just, kind of as if it's, just been worn a bit. It highlights that geometry that's already there anyway. It doesn't seem too identical materials up to it, and it just accents that shape. It's a little goes a long way. It's not so much that we're saying make it look mildewy or anything like that, which is absolutely not the case. We're saying use what's there to make it look a little better. And better does not mean worn. I don't think we actually use the word worn. I know we use the word aged, and that seems to have gotten me because I'm the one that wrote it in some hot water, but again, it's of the time. Imagine the tools they were struck. Yeah, and there's just a kind of a flavor that comes with it. It's maybe I'll provide some more examples on the forums of kind of what we're looking for that show explicitly that point versus kind of what we're getting. And again, you guys see the screenshots. We see the intimate details not only in the model but the textures. A screenshot is still a screenshot, depending on how it's rendered or the lighting, some of that stuff that we see, and a lot of the times we look at the screenshot and we're like, all right, it looks pretty cool. We'll go through the entire process, convert it, get it in the client, see how it looks, and go, that's not where it needs to be. Yeah. We want it to succeed, but we don't want something like the sumac to kind of happen again. And
Well, we do.
We'll go ahead and add something to that, because I don't know anything about EQ. I'm not an EQ player. That's not my thing. Sorry. Calm down there, bro. But I'm looking at some of the stuff that comes in for Plant Side 2, and at the end of the day, it's my name on the product, and I see it as an extension of me. And I treat all the people on the forums as one of my artists. So they have to be able to take my direction as well as the people that I work with on site. So if I'm giving direction to somebody on site and they're pushing back and pushing back and pushing back, they eventually get fired because I don't need that. I just don't need it. I already got enough stress in my life. It's called 19-year-old son. So I'm hearing is that he's given his direction, and the direction is either being ignored or people think that they know best. But at the end of the day, it's my ass on the line. So if I put something in, like whatever this sumac thing is, whoever did that, obviously the person's not here. It's probably for a reason, because it's sumac. Sumac got him. But at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to make sure the integrity of the game is held. And if we can't do that without hurting somebody's feelings, then so be it. That's the way it is. But that's our jobs. And you, as basically employees, by proxy, have to pretty much follow our direction in order to make sure that the game stays consistent.
We feel like we're all part of our team. We talk about him, we think of him as Raul, not Jerry. And he's absolutely part of the team. Have you seen the tables where he went back in and drew the carved the leaves in it? And it's sort of a greenish yellow and a really fun color. And I don't want to say too much because it's not my territory, but I really like them. And I think they're much better now. Anyway, but it does narrow it down where you can place it in a home because it now has that color detail on it. I understand that too, even though I never got the genes for house decorating. But thank you very much for coming. Please come up and talk to us. If you see us in a bar tonight, please come up and let's buy with me.